Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is the 1st of February 2023. These are the stories that we will be discussing in detail in the course of our show. We will begin with the latest as far as the Peshawar incident is concerned. More than 100 have perished, have lost their lives, hundreds have been injured. A lot of questions arise as far as this incident of terrorism is concerned, as far as the lapse is concerned, as far as the access to the mosque within the civil lines in the red area of Peshawar is concerned, and how the government needs to move together with all the stakeholders to take the necessary measures in order to further thwart any such attempts in the future. Khaja Asif Saab yesterday talked in the parliament, so did Rana Sanaullah Saab, and highlighted some very key issues regarding the security of the country and how to move forward. This is going to be our first segment. Our second story of the day, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the talks between the IMF and Pakistan and the future of Pakistan's economic outlook, so as to say. How important are these talks for Pakistan? How important are these talks for Pakistan's economy? Also, what are the basic measures that now need to be taken by Pakistan in order to strengthen its economy? Will we be relying more on the IMF? Will we be relying on other important stakeholders, international and national and regional as well? This is going to be our second story. Then we will be talking about Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, where the Indian troops in their another unabated act of terrorism have martyred 10 Kashmiris, including 2 young boys and a woman, during the outgoing month of January. These are the statistics just for the month of January. On the 1st of February, we thought it'd be important to highlight the number of casualties that have happened as a result of these barbarities by the Indian troops in the illegally held Jammu and Kashmir region. And finally, we'll be talking of the World Interfaith Harmony Week that is being observed across the world today to realize the need for dialogue amongst different faith and religions. When we see what is happening in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir or Palestine or other areas, the need for interfaith harmony becomes even more important. This is going to be our last story. Let's begin with our first segment, and that concerns the incident that occurred in Peshawar and the number of casualties that have been increasing ever since. The latest figures point towards more than 100 casualties who've lost their lives as a result of this suicide bomb attack that happened in the civil lines in Peshawar, a red zone area. And of course, this was while the people were saying their Zohar prayers. Many hundreds have also been injured. Some of them are still critical. The fact remains that a lot of questions arise as to the security apparatus, as to such elements that are behind such brutalities and heinous incidents. What is their resolve? What should the government do? How should the government move forward? And how should the government also ask all stakeholders to come as one when it comes to measures to be taken as far as the future of Pakistan's security and security apparatus is concerned? More in the following report.
Over the past few months, the law and order situation in the country has deteriorated, with terrorist groups like the outlawed Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the Islamic State group and Gul Bahadur group executing deadly attacks. The resurgence of violent militancy over the last several months has ended, and relative calm witnessed after years of military operations in the region. The savage bombing targeting a mosque in Peshawar's police lines is a disturbing reminder of the havoc terrorism is capable of. KP has been bearing the brunt of terrorist onslaught ever since the TTP renounced their truce with the state late last year. While attacks mainly targeting law enforcement personnel have been occurring with a regular frequency, the police lines bombing is surely a major escalation. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has emphasized that terrorism is a foremost national security challenge for the government. The world community has strongly condemned the suicide bomb blast at a mosque in Peshawar and reiterated solidarity with Pakistan in its efforts to address terrorism and violent extremism. The nation, all political parties and every partner stands united in the fight against terrorism and implementation of national action plan. The sheer scale of the human tragedy is unimaginable, and this is no less than an attack on Pakistan.
Brigadier Saad Mohammed, who's a defense analyst, joins us online. Sir, thank you very much to have joined us. So when you look at this heinous incident in Peshawar, it brings to mind and reminds us of many such heinous incidents that Pakistan has seen in the last couple of years, the most notable being what happened in 2014, the APS attack. is it a very sad remembrance of the lapse of security apparatus or the menace of such elements that are trying to destabilize Pakistan? What is the basic aim of such elements that cause incidents as heinous as these?
The Peshawar incident has been a very unfortunate one, in which more than 100 precious lives, especially of the police personnel, have been lost. And this is an attack directly on the state of Pakistan. The TTP, which has remained ambivalent, they first claimed and then they denied, but all the indicators point towards the hand of all those terrorists who are under various labels stationed in Afghanistan, and from there they plan and execute attacks against the Pakistan state. The aim, as you've asked, the aim of these people is to destabilize the state of Pakistan and wrest control of the affairs of the state, dictate to this state a philosophy or an ideology which is not implementable in the modern world. Their worldview does not, have any commonality with how states or how modern states are run. But that's what the problem is. We have to deal with these people. Now, what to do about it? The first thing is that Pakistan is responsible for its own security. We cannot be dependent on the security or the goodwill of the Afghans, whether it was this regime or it was the previous regime. They will remain uncooperative. So Pakistan has to look after its own security. First is the internal problems. And if you look at the Peshawar incident, this was a huge lapse in security. It has got the place, if you want to approach it, there are 3 tiers of security before you can reach the place that the suicide bomber or whoever carried out this attack had reached that place and placed the explosives within that zone. So that's a huge security lapse. The other is our intelligence failure also, because these people have to move across a large distance coming from Afghanistan. They have to cross the border, which is fenced. Then they have to have minimum 2 staging areas between the border and the police lines in Peshawar. Where did they stay? Why didn't we know? These questions have to be answered. The other is that some of these people are based across the border. Even then, there are ways and means of neutralizing those people. Pakistan has the resources, Pakistan has the capacity. It requires the will that anybody who attacks the state of Pakistan, wherever he is, must not go unpunished.
Now you talk of will, sir. The first thing that comes to my mind is the National Action Plan that was implemented in 2014 after the APS attack on the innocent children. Do you feel that the National Action Plan needs to be revisited, updated with new mechanisms and methodologies added to it so that we can confront all such incidents and all such apparatus that are trying to destabilize our country with an updated point of view or an updated philosophy?
The 2014 is almost 9 years back. So a lot of changes have come there. The technology has improved. The rank and file of the TTP has also changed. There will be more educated people in that. There will be people who would understand modern technology. And the other factor is that they have a safe haven in Afghanistan. Ideologically, they are on the same wavelength with the regime inside Afghanistan. They consider Mr. Habatullah Akhundzada as their leader. So they conform to the ideology of the present Afghan rulers. The other is that now those rulers in Afghanistan have given them a safe haven and, accept some statements coming here and there. Then by and large being given authority to do whatever they feel like, or they don't have the authority to impose their will or their state writ on the areas in which these people are stationed. So we have to deal with these changes. The other very important factor is the weapons and the technologically advanced weapon systems that these people have acquired. After the Americans and NATO troops withdrawal from Afghanistan, a huge quantity of arms was left behind. Some left by the Americans and their allies, some by the Afghan National Army, which disintegrated after the fall of Kabul. So some of that has come into their possession. The other factor is that about 2,500 hardcore Taliban militants were released after the Taliban took over the Kabul administration. Here too, we were involved in the negotiations with the terrorists, and I believe that's what is alleged, that about 400 to 500 Taliban fighters and their senior ideologues had been released from Pakistani prisons. Now, these are some of the fatal blunders that we have made while violating the principle that there has to be no negotiations with the terrorists. We must
All
get
right,
to their
sir, I'd like to also
roots.
understand another
Must
perspective on all of this. I'd like to understand another perspective on all of this. Khaja Asif Sahab, our Minister for Defence, made a very passionate speech in the Parliament yesterday. What he also did during that speech was link what is the current situation and these incidents that are happening in Pakistan with Pakistan's previous strategy vis-a-vis Afghanistan. Do we also have to revisit that?
Our policy was flawed, deeply flawed in Afghanistan. We didn't understand the Afghan mind. Whether they're Taliban or whether any other government in Afghanistan, for them, Pakistan is a country which they dislike. Majority of the Afghans, they dislike Pakistan. They have a poor opinion about Pakistan. So whether they are Taliban or the previous regime, they don't like Pakistan. Now, Khwaja Asif Saab, due deference, we all know the past. So why get into the past? What we need now is how to go forward. Discard those policies. Yes, by all means do that. But please tell us what is the plan in the future. At this point in time, there is despondency. I do not know. It was not on the media that I've seen, but on the social media, one can see even the police protests in Peshawar. Now, that is a very alarming situation that must be addressed, and we must have a very firm plan as to how to deal with the terrorists. Whether the terrorists are based on the Pakistani soil, the sleeper cells there, the facilitators, or the masterminds which are sitting across the border. We have the means to deal with them, and we must now have the will to deal with them.
Sir, we have waged very important wars in the past against all such terrorist elements. Do you feel another war is in the pipeline as far as eliminating such elements that are trying to destabilize Pakistan?
Yes, we must have a fresh plan now. Previous plans have not worked. They didn't finish off the problem as it was claimed. Now we must do something, and we have a lot of examples. I don't want to mention them here. And we have examples of states which were confronted with terrorism and they dealt with it very effectively, and those countries are now safe from the actions of the terrorists. We must also study this, how such countries did it. And we have the capacity. I have no doubt in that we have the capacity to deal with situations. Previously also we dealt with it. We did achieve successes. No, not completely, but we did achieve success. This time we must act decisively and finish this problem once and for all.
Sir, what kind of tactical maneuvering or kinetic strategy in your point of view is needed to be implemented by our governments, by our armed forces in order to properly and firmly counter these elements?
Within Pakistan, we are mostly now doing what we are doing right now is pruning the branches. That does not help, because if we prune the branches will grow again at some point in time, like we did that in the previous years. Aim should now be to go for the root, the ideologues. We must have a plan how to deal with them, how to poison the roots, so that this big tree of terrorism that is now, confronting Pakistan, it must be eliminated. I will not go into the tactical details of how it is to be done. Those people who are at the helm will know these ways and means of how to deal with threats which are outside our borders, and we must deal with them.
Speaking of dealing with all such elements, I'd like to refer again to Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the Inspector General IG Muazzam Jah Ansari, who said that there was no central command at the police lines and the checking mechanism was limited to the gate. Do you feel that our security forces also need to update their mechanisms as to properly check all such elements in the future? Do you feel proper training is also required of our police personnel or our CTD?
With the IG, he should have not been there on that post after what he has said. He has failed in his job. So the first thing is that if he had some, honor, he should have left the job. He should have resigned his post as an IG, because such a, lapse which occurred under his command is not acceptable. The other is that the government must act. The provincial government should not tolerate such things. And anybody who is found wanting, or if there are lapses, then heads must roll. The other important point is that there might be, some infiltration of the police by the terrorists. That has to be looked into. But transporting such huge amount of explosives through 3 tiers of security points to something that there could possibly be, infiltration of the ranks of the police. Somebody facilitated him to get entry into such a sensitive area. Now, this must be looked into. The police training must be revisited. Plus, they must be given the weapons so that they confront. The terrorists have got weapons which are far superior to what our police has. Some of the weapons might be superior to what the army holds. Because Afghanistan army, the Afghan National Army, and the Americans had the most sophisticated weapons that they have produced. And they have fallen into the hands of these terrorists. So we must arm the police properly. We must train the police properly. We must carry out a security check so that all such bad hats who have been working for the terrorists, they must be weeded out and must be punished. The police leadership must, come down and find out as to what is lacking and why did it happen. This is too serious, an incident to be just brushed aside or to be.
There are many questions. I agree with you. There are many questions, and of course, some of those questions were also answered yesterday in the Parliament. But a lot of other questions are going to be answered. As Khalid Asif Sahab also said, that the Chief of the Army Staff, the DGISI, will also be presenting their point of view in the Parliament very soon. Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Balochistan, and now Punjab, where a TTP attack on Mianwali police station was repulsed. Do you feel we need also stronger counter-terrorism cooperation with the regional partners as well as the US? Because the US has also indicated that it is ready to help Pakistan as far as counter-terrorism is concerned.
That is very helpful. We must, obtain wherever assistance is possible. However, we should not rely on them. We must fight our own war. This is our war. We have to fight it. Now, if there is some assistance coming from other countries, from our allies, it's most welcome. But we should not depend on that or not wait for those that assistance to come. We have to fight our own war. Nobody is going to fight our war for us. So we have got to fight it. And we must have the will and the capacity to fight it to the bitter end.
And inshallah, sir, I'm sure that we will go forward with that resolve to completely eliminate these elements. We've done that in the past, and inshallah ta'ala, this time also we will do this with the cooperation of all the stakeholders that are present in Pakistan. Thank you so very much, Brigadier Retired Saad Mohammed Saab, Defence Analyst, to have joined us, to have talked to us about this heinous incident that has happened in a mosque in the police lines in the red zone area of Peshawar, and the lot of questions that emanate as a result of that, and how we need to move forward as a consequence of these questions and such incidents to further strengthen our society and our cities. Our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the negotiations or the meetings that are going on between the IMF and Pakistan in Islamabad as we speak. These have already begun. A lot of preconditions are being put forward by the IMF, a lot of admissions are being made by the government. Things seem to be moving around in a smooth fashion. How will they culminate? What will be the end result? More in the following report.
Pakistan had secured a $6 billion IMF bailout in 2019, which was topped up with another $1 billion last year, but the lender then stalled disbursement in November due to apprehensions regarding fiscal consolidation and economic reforms. The federal government has already implemented two major conditions of the lender, including allowing adjustment of the rupee against the dollar and surge in petroleum prices ahead of the talks. Pakistan barely has enough to cover 3 weeks of imports and urgently needs the IMF to release the next $1 billion tranche of its bailout program. The International Monetary Fund delegation's arrival in the country for discussions on the 9th review have restored some investor confidence. The rupee, which recently hit a record low, appreciated by 4.43 rupees against the US dollar in the interbank market. The Pakistan Stock Exchange saw a return of positive sentiment as the benchmark KSE 100 index registered a gain over 750 points. IMF Mission Chief for Pakistan Nathan Porter is already in Islamabad to start a technical discussion with authorities. The second phase of policy negotiations would continue till February the 9th to finalize a memorandum of economic and financial policies. Pakistan requires about $8 to $9 billion during the remaining 5 months of the current fiscal year to meet international obligations, and currently the reserves held by the central bank are slightly over $3 billion.
Dr. Ghulam Samad, who's an economist belonging to the CAREC Institute at the ADB, joins us online. Dr. Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. It's a very important point as far as Pakistan and its future and its stability is concerned because of these talks between the IMF and Pakistan. How much importance do you give to these talks, and what will be the end result of these talks?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I think the fundamental importance of having the IMF in the Islamabad city is, I think, as you mentioned, there's a lots of things that are attached to the successful completion of the stock level agreement. I think the first one, if we look into the overall market sentiments, I think it will bring a lots of good market sentiments to the markets. As you mentioned, we can definitely see in last couple of days the appreciation in the Pakistan rupees. We can also see the indexation of the stock markets out there. But along with that, I think if we look into the bilateral pledges, I think that is a very positive kind of attachment that is attached to the IMF successful completion. First, recently, the Prime Minister of Pakistan visited a number of friendly countries, and I think we can see lots of rollovers, and we can also see some additional loan to a government of Pakistan. So if we can successfully complete the negotiation here in the city, I think the bilateral pledges, that is something I'm really looking forward. And if you can recall recently from the Geneva mode, we can also see, along with the bilateral pledges, we can also see the multilateral pledges as well. And if you can recall, there were different multilateral agencies, Islamic Development Bank were there, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and along others. So I can also see the multilateral pledges that are also attached to the successful completion of the IMF. And also recently, I can see some good news for the remittances in Pakistan as well. So what I can see here, a broad picture is that I can see a very positive sentiments for the Pakistani markets in terms of the having the positive, I would say positive hope for the bilateral and multilateral pledges. I can also see the more remittances that will definitely bring in some good news for the increase in reserves in Pakistan. And I can also see the performance of the stock markets. So these are some of the attachment, I would say, that are attached to the successful completion of the IMF in the city.
Tough economic conditions seem to be the order of the day as far as the IMF's point of view is concerned, concerning Pakistan. Is the Pakistani government bracing for these tough decisions?
Well, if you look into the broader IMF conditionalities, definitely I can borrow what you've been saying is, for example, mainly IMF, they were looking for the market exchange rate. And I think if you can recall since last week, we've been doing it. Second, I think the important conditionality is that how we can basically impose the new taxation so that we can narrow down the fiscal gap. The IMF is more of concern to reduce the fiscal gap in a window or a range of 2 to 3 billion rupees. So fiscal gap is again one of the key concerns, how we can basically narrow down it by increasing the taxation and also by reducing the subsidies. And if you can look into the overall conditionality, I would say definitely these are something that will definitely will bring, I would say, some hardness for the government of Pakistan. But on the positive side, if you can relate the conditionality with the FBR revenue collections, I think I can see a positive things there in the FBR revenue collections. We do currently see around 2 trillion rupees gaps are there. But when you devalue your currency by almost 14%, and if you can increase the domestic inflation in your country, definitely it should be. The economic theory is there. It should be increase in the revenue collections. Though if it is not in par with, like if you reduce your currency by 15%, may not be possible to increase your revenue collection by 15%. But it will, again, I can see the FBR kind of, I would say, a good news for FBR to increase the revenue. So definitely I agree with you, there are tough conditionalities. But again, at the same time, along with tough conditionalities, I can see some good news for the FBR revenue collections that will definitely will bring some hopes for the fiscal gifts in Pakistan. And I can also see that how the basically I think the real thing is that now we devalue our currency. We are bringing in new taxation here as per the IMF is concerned. We can also increase the energy tariffs. So, but now how we can efficiently basically utilize the IMF conditionality for the positiveness of the Pakistan's economic indicators. So I agree with you, but I think there's a hope that is attached to the IMF conditionality implementation.
Just speaking of IMF conditionalities, Dr. Samad, the IMF mission chief, Mr. Porter, has said that Pakistan and the IMF will work together on fiscal reforms. You have highlighted some of those. What further fiscal reforms do you feel is the IMF hinting at?
Well, these are, I think, the same reform that I mentioned here. I think the main concern is about the narrow down the fiscal deficit. Where through the decrease in your subsidies, where through the increase in your taxation, or increase in your revenue, or decrease in your expenditure. So broadly, they are looking forward like how you can basically hit your fiscal decrease in fiscal deficit first. B, I think they are more of concern now. We have been significantly in a energy circular debt. There's a huge electricity circular debt. There's a huge gas circular debt. I think that is again something IMF is really looking forward in terms of the fiscal reform, so that we can attach the overall energy circular debt to the fiscal reforms. So that is second. And if you can see, since yesterday, I can see the increase in energy tariff from the range of 5 to 7 rupees, and I can also see the 30% increase in LPG. This is again the second main, I would say, fiscal reforms that is IMF is asking for. So overall, the third one, as I mentioned earlier, the increase in the revenue, the FBR revenue. So this is the overall picture that IMF is looking forward. So Pakistan can basically decrease or bring down the fiscal deficit to a substance level.
Dr. Saab, is strict fiscal discipline implementable in the long run in a country like Pakistan?
Well, I would definitely say yes, but it all depends that how you best implement all those promises that you've been making. I think the implementation is something we've been, as a country, really need to looking forward. So, for example, if you can, one of the discussion that has been going on since yesterday, for example, if we can increase the taxation, and we agree here with the IMF by increasing the taxation, the IMF concern is that they are really looking forward for political consensus. So if the current government agree with the IMF that, okay, we are going forward and increase the taxation, whether the other political parties will be agreeing on that or not. So developing a political consensus in a country like this, I think that is very much important, so that you can foresee what has been there down the line, 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years. So I think having a political consensus, that is most important, and also bringing in internally and externally the promises that we are making with the IMF, and the promises that we are making today with the people, with the institutions. I think that is something really important currently that will develop the trust deficit within the organization and across the organization, so that you can, once you go ahead, I think you can see what you have just said, that I see, yes, but there's challenges in terms of developing the consensus, the political consensus, and also the organizational consensus internally and externally.
When you look at energy sector reforms, this is also a question that is on everybody's minds, whether it be the IMF, the government, or even the layman. What important energy sector reforms do you feel will be implemented in the coming days, and what do you feel its impact is going to be on the general public in Pakistan?
Well, if you look into the broader impact, like I think currently, I don't have the exact figure, but my hunch is that it's cost approximately 2 to 3% of the GDP. The overall energy, I would say, the shortages, right? And if you can look into the overall energy subsidies, that is again humongous, right? But the question here is that, as an economist, I'm not going opposing the energy subsidies. I am opposing the subsidies that basically targets the rich segment of the societies. So my kind of a suggestion here is that instead of targeting the rich segment of the societies, it should not go there. Basically, it should go to the poor segment of the society. So the question here is that how basically you can reform the subsidies in Pakistan. So instead of hitting the rich segment of the society, it should go and hit the poor segment of the society. I had an analysis here, and I think the welfare is significantly, especially in current situation where the inflation is almost close to 30%. Poverty is again huge in our country. Recently, the flood also hit the Pakistan economies. So if we can frame the subsidies in the energy sectors for a poor segment of the society, that would be something, I think, very important fiscal or energy sector reform. Thirdly, I think in a broader umbrella, or a broader perspectives, we have seen it, the energy losses, transmission losses. There's a range of figures, but I think from 5 to 16 or 15%, this is again a significant number that has been there, right? So I think we need to work on that, how we can basically trim down the losses in the energy sectors, where we can bring in new technologies, or we can bring in some efficiency, so that we can increase or decrease the energy losses in our economies. And I think finally, broader picture is there. We've been saying it a lot, but how? By bringing in market reforms, like if you can look into the world picture, privatization is there, right? But how effectively in Pakistan you can privatize the energy sectors? This is a big question here. The effectiveness of the privatization is very much important. We had already privatized some of the sectors. Unfortunately, they are not basically paying in terms of bringing in efficiency or competition to the market. Rather than instead, still we are paying subsidies to the privatized entities in Pakistan. So broadly, in energy sector reforms, I think I can see the subsidies approach should be changed, or should be basically favor the poor segment of the society. We should need to work on the privatization aspect. We should need to work on the reduction of the transmission losses that has been attached to it. So these are broader, some of the, I would say, reforms that are required in the energy sector. So
exactly, many reforms are required, Dr. Samad, and I hope those reforms will be implemented in the near future, so that this deal with the IMF is finalized. Thank you very much, Dr. Ghulam Samad, the economist with the CAREC Institute at the ADB, joining us, talking to us about these meetings between the IMF and Pakistan that are going on. This brings us to the end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow. Allah Hafiz.